She cornered me in the kitchen at 7 in the morning, backed me against the counter with the specific fury of a woman who had been holding something in for weeks and had finally decided the holding was over. Brya Ashcroft, Alpha Cael Ashcroft's wife, Luna of Veldran Pack, standing in the kitchen in her silk robe with her hands shaking slightly and her eyes doing the thing eyes did when they were managing grief and rage simultaneously, and the rage was winning. "I know what you are," she said. "I know what you want." I looked at her. I thought, she thinks this is about Cael. She thought I was here for her husband. She thought the threat I posed was the threat of a woman who wanted the alpha. I almost told her right then. Almost. But the thing about the truth I was carrying was that telling it in a kitchen at 7 in the morning, against a counter, while a woman who already hated me pointed her fury in my direction, that was not the right way for this truth to land. This truth needed to be told carefully. This truth needed to be told to the right people, in the right order, with the right documentation. Because the truth I was carrying was not about Cael Ashcroft. It was about his wife. It was about who Brya Ashcroft really was. And it was going to destroy everything she had spent 14 years building, including, possibly, her freedom. If you think you know where this story is going, you don't. Like the video, hit that subscribe button right now, and drop in the comments where you are watching from. This is about to go somewhere that is going to change everything you think you understood from the first 30 seconds. Let's get into it. My name is Wren Coss. I came to Veldran Pack as an investigator, not a private investigator in the informal sense. A formal continental governance investigator, one of 12 wolves in the Northern Territories who held the specific designation of Pack Integrity Officer, a role created 30 years ago by the Continental Governance Body to address a specific and recurring problem, the deliberate falsification of Pack governance records, and the specific harm that falsification caused to the wolves whose lives and fates were recorded in those documents. I had been doing this work for 6 years. I had seen a great deal. I had seen packs whose founding documents had been altered to change the recorded bloodlines of their alpha families, erasing inconvenient branches of the family tree. I had seen inheritance records modified to redirect the transfer of property between generations. I had seen the birth records of specific wolves changed, names altered, dates moved, parentage reassigned, to produce outcomes that served someone's interest. I had seen one wolf framed for a crime she had not committed because altering 3 records had been sufficient to create a version of events that looked compelling to a pack council that did not have the investigative tools to look beneath the surface. That wolf had spent 4 years in pack detention before I reviewed her case. For years. Her name was Asta Vane, and she was 42 years old, and she had spent 4 years separated from her children for something she had not done. And when I found the altered records and proved the alteration, she had sat across from me in the interview room and cried for 11 minutes without stopping. I had never forgotten Asta Vane. She was the reason I had been doing this work for 6 years with the specific, sustained dedication of someone who understood that the work was not abstract, that behind every altered record was a person whose life had been changed without their knowledge or consent. I came to Veldran Pack because a record had been altered, a specific record, a critical one, and the person who had altered it was the alpha's wife. The record was a birth record, specifically, the birth record of Brya Ashcroft, née Vin. Brya had been born 29 years ago in a pack called Grenfell in the Eastern Territories. She was the daughter of the Grenfell Alpha, a position that carried significant social weight, and which was the foundation of her marriage to Cael Ashcroft, who had been the alpha of Veldran and whose council had approved the match on the basis of the alliance value of combining the Ashcroft and Vin bloodlines. The blood value, the specific genetic inheritance that an alpha bloodline carried. Brya's claim to the Grenfell Alpha's bloodline was the basis of her standing in Veldran. It was the basis of her position as Luna. It was the basis of the treaty arrangement between Veldran and Grenfell that had been active for 5 years. And it was a lie, not a small lie. Not the kind of lie that lived in the territory between truth and presentation, between what was technically accurate and what was emphasized. A fundamental, documented, deliberate lie. Brya Ashcroft was not the daughter of the Grenfell Alpha. She was the daughter of the Grenfell Alpha's household staff. A gardener's daughter, not the heir to a bloodline. The documentation was in the Grenfell archive. The original birth record, before it had been altered, had been preserved in a secondary archive location that whoever had done the alteration had not known about. I had found it, and the evidence of the alteration was in the ink. The specific chemical composition of the ink used to write the recorded parentage was 3 years younger than the ink used for the rest of the document. Someone had physically altered the birth record, had erased one set of parents and written in another. The erasure was not perfect. The secondary archive's preservation environment had stabilized the document in its altered state, but the underlying original was detectable with the right equipment. I had the right equipment. I had the technical analysis. I had the secondary archive's original record. And I had, because the investigation had been running for 2 months before I arrived in Veldran, a very clear picture of who had performed the alteration and when. Brya Ven, now Brya Ashcroft, had altered her own birth record 14 years ago, when she was 15 years old. She had altered it herself, with the specific, methodical precision of a 15-year-old who had access to her pack's record office, and she had done it well enough that nobody had looked closely. Until I did. I need to tell you what the investigation looked like from inside Veldran Pack, because the inside perspective is the one that matters for understanding what happened. I arrived with a cover. All pack integrity investigations operated undercover initially. The cover was necessary because falsifiers who knew they were being investigated were falsifiers who destroyed evidence, fled jurisdictions, or, in 2 cases I knew personally, engaged in activities designed to neutralize the investigation before it could be completed. My cover was that I was a governance documents specialist brought in to assist with Veldran's 5-year records review. A routine process, conducted by every pack on a rotating schedule, that involved a specialist coming in to verify the archive's compliance with continental governance standards. Routine. Unremarkable. The kind of thing that packs accepted without significant interest because it happened regularly and produced nothing interesting. I was very good at being unremarkable. I had pale hair that I kept back and plain clothes, and the specific quality of professional invisibility that came from 3 years of deliberately not being memorable in packs where I was investigating things. The cover put me in the archive every day. The archive was where I needed to be. What I had not accounted for was Brya Ashcroft. She noticed me on the 3rd day. I do not know what she noticed specifically. I was doing routine records work. I was being professionally unremarkable. I was not, to any observable standard, a threat. But Brya Ashcroft had spent 14 years knowing that somewhere in the Grenfell archive, there was evidence of what she had done. And that knowledge had produced, over 14 years, a specific, heightened sensitivity to anyone who might be in the vicinity of that evidence. She did not know I had already found it. She did not know the Grenfell investigation had been concluded 2 months before I arrived. What she knew was, a governance documents specialist had arrived. A governance documents specialist was in the archive. And a governance documents specialist was the specific, threatening category of person who might, in the course of routine work, find something that was not supposed to be found. She began watching me. I noticed her watching. I had been watched by investigated parties before. It was always uncomfortable in the specific way of being seen by someone who did not know exactly what they were seeing. What I had not expected was the conclusion she arrived at. She watched me for 3 days. She watched me note the times Cael Ashcroft came to the archive for his routine administrative review, which he did twice a week, because he was the alpha and his administrative review included archive sign-offs. She watched me look up when he came in. She watched us exchange the specific professional pleasantries of an alpha and a visiting governance specialist. And she concluded, with the specific, jealous certainty of a woman who had been maintaining a marriage and a position and a lie for 14 years under the continuous strain of someone who expected exposure at any moment. She concluded that I was a threat to her marriage rather than a threat to her freedom. She thought I wanted Cael. What I actually wanted was justice. Those two things were going to produce, in the weeks that followed, a very different kind of confrontation than she was expecting. The kitchen confrontation was not the first contact. The first contact was a social gathering, the Pack's weekly communal dinner, which the visiting governance specialist was invited to attend as a matter of basic hospitality. I had attended. I was sitting at the long table with the Pack's administrative staff, eating the excellent venison stew that Veldran's kitchen had produced, and I had been deep in a conversation about the archive's cataloging system with the head archivist, a meticulous woman named Faye who was my closest professional contact in the Pack, and who genuinely believed I was there for the records review, when Brya sat down across from me. Not beside me. Across. The specific positioning of someone who intended to look at you directly. "You're the governance specialist," she said. "Yes," I said. "Wren Coss. Brya Ashcroft." "I know," I said. "Luna of Veldran. Thank you for the hospitality." She looked at me. It was not a warm look. "How long will the review take?" she asked. "The review protocol is 6 weeks," I said. "I'll be here for 6 weeks." "Staying in the guest compound?" "Yes." "And your focus is?" "The Pack's birth, death, and land records from the last 10 years, I said. "Standard compliance verification." She was very still. 10 years, she said. "Yes," I said. "The 10-year review cycle is standard. Occasionally I go further back if there are documents that span the review period." Faye, beside me, started talking about the cataloging system again. I turned back to the conversation with Faye. I did not watch Brya leave, but I felt her watching me for the next hour. The second contact was 2 weeks in. I was in the archive late, not unusual for a records review. There was always late work, and I had learned to use the late hours because the archive was quieter and I could work through the more sensitive documentation without the ambient distraction of the administrative staff. I was reviewing documents when I heard footsteps. Not Faye. Faye went home at 5. The footsteps were precise, controlled. Someone who was aware of how they moved. Brya came around the shelf with a tea tray. 2 cups. She set the tray on the work table beside me. "It's late," she said. "Records review often requires extended hours," I said. "You've been here every evening this week." "Yes." She sat down in the chair across from me. This was not the hostility of the first contact. This was something different. Calculated. The specific, careful approach of a woman who had decided that intelligence was more useful than aggression. "What have you found?" she asked. "Nothing significant so far," I said. "The archive is well maintained. Faye runs a thorough operation. But you're looking for something specific." "The review has specific parameters," I said. "I follow the parameters." She looked at her tea. "You look up," she said, "when Cael comes in." I looked at her. "He's the alpha," I said. "When the alpha enters a room, it is appropriate to acknowledge the presence." "You look up even before he comes through the door," she said. I said nothing. "I've been watching," she said. "I know," I said. She was very still. "You know I've been watching you," she said. "Yes," I said. "And you're not." "I'm not trying to attract the alpha's attention," I said. "I'm doing governance work that requires my full professional focus. I would find it useful not to be watched while I do it." Her expression, not anger, something more complicated. The look of a woman who had been prepared for one kind of confrontation and had encountered another. "I don't believe you," she said. "That's your right," I said. "The records review will be complete in 4 weeks. When it's complete, you will see exactly what I was doing here." She looked at me for a long moment. "What will I see?" she asked. I held her gaze. "The truth," I said. She left. The tea sat on the table. I kept working. The kitchen confrontation was in the 3rd week. 7 in the morning. Her silk robe. Her shaking hands. "I know what you are. I know what you want." I looked at her. I thought, She thinks this is about Cael. I said no. You don't. She blinked. You've been in the archive every evening, she said. You've been in conversations with Cael twice this week about the Eastern Governance documents. The Eastern Governance documents relate to the records review, I said. The Alpha's access is required for the historical treaty files. You're using the review as an excuse, she said. I'm using the review to do my job, I said. Your job is looking for reasons to spend time with my husband. I looked at her. I made a decision. Not the full truth. Not yet. But enough to redirect the specific crisis of the morning, because whatever else was happening, having this conversation in her kitchen at 7 in the morning was not going to serve anyone. Brya, I said. She went still at my use of her name. What I am looking for in this archive, I said carefully, has nothing to do with your husband. When the review is complete, you will understand that fully. I need you to believe me enough to let the process finish. She was very still. What are you looking for? She asked. I can't tell you that, I said. Not yet. Why not? Because you are the party who is most affected by what I find, I said. And protocol requires that the affected party receive the findings in a formal setting with appropriate support, not standing in a kitchen. She stared at me. The specific quality of that stare, the way her face went completely still, told me she understood. Not the details, not what specifically I had found, but the shape of it. She understood that what I was looking for was something she had done, not something about her husband, something about her. Oh, she said. The word was very quiet. Yes, I said. She sat down. The kitchen counter she had been leaning against suddenly not being supportive enough. She sat at the kitchen table with the look of a woman who had spent 14 years waiting for something and had just felt it arrive. How long? She asked. I have 1 more week of documentation to complete, I said. And then the formal process will begin. Formal process, she said. The findings review. The notification. The formal hearing. I paused. You should speak to a counsel. Someone who specializes in governance law. She was looking at the table. You're not here for Cael, she said. No, I said. You're here for me. I'm here for the record, I said. For what is accurate and what was altered. I'm here for the people whose lives are affected by that alteration. She was quiet for a long time. Who? She asked. Who is affected? I looked at her. You want me to tell you who else knows? I said. Yes, she said. Officially, only the Continental Governance Investigation Team, I said. I am the only person in this pack who knows. Cael doesn't know, she said. No, I said. She closed her eyes. My children, she said. I had not known about the children until that moment. The investigation had not been tracking the household's domestic details, only the governance documents. How many? I asked. 2, she said. 8 and 6. I sat with that. The children. 8 and 6. Whatever came from the formal process, it was going to land on an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. I'm sorry, I said. She opened her eyes. She looked at me. You're sorry, she said. You're about to expose everything I built, and you're sorry. I'm sorry about your children, I said. What I found in the archive is not something I can unsee or unfind or choose not to report. The falsification of a birth record, used to establish a governance position in a pack, is a continental offense. I don't have the authority to decline to report it. I paused. But I am sorry about the people who didn't choose this. She looked at the table. I was 15, she said. I waited. I was 15 and I understood what being the gardener's daughter in a pack meant, she said. I understood what it would mean for the rest of my life. The positions available. The matches possible. The ceiling that existed above everyone who was not bloodline. She paused. I was 15 and I had access to the record office because I cleaned it as part of my household duties. And I understood what I could change, and I changed it. Yes, I said. I didn't hurt anyone, she said. I was very careful with my response. Not directly, I said. The families whose records were not falsified competed for the Veldran Alpha's alliance on the assumption that you were what you represented yourself to be. They made decisions based on that assumption. I paused. And there is the question of what you took. Not from a person, from the bloodline. The Grenfell Alpha's actual descendants. She looked at me. There were no actual descendants, she said. I was the only child in the household. His actual heirs were elsewhere, from his formal mate. I did not take from anyone. I filled a space that was empty. That is not a determination I can make, I said. That is what the hearing is for. She was quiet. Tell me what happens, she said. From here. Tell me what the process is. I told her, not to comfort her, because she had asked directly and she deserved a direct answer. The formal findings report would be filed with the Continental Governance in 5 days, following the completion of my documentation. The notification to the affected parties, which meant her and Cael and the Grenfell Pack's current governance, would happen simultaneously. The formal hearing would be scheduled within 30 days. She would have the opportunity to present her account. The hearing board would make determinations about the breach, the consequences, and the question of the alliance treaty. She listened to all of it. The treaty, she said. Yes, I said. The treaty between Veldran and Grenfell was based on the representation that you carried the Grenfell Alpha's bloodline. If that representation was false, the treaty's validity is affected. And Cael, she said. His marriage. The validity of a governance match built on a falsified claim is a matter for the hearing board, I said. His marriage, she said again. Our children's legitimacy. The pact standing. The treaty. She looked at the table. Everything. Not everything, I said. She looked up. Your children are real, I said. They are his children, whatever else is determined. The things you built with real effort, your role in this pack, the relationships you have made, the work you have done as Luna, those things are assessed on their own terms. I paused. The falsification is what it is, but it is not the whole of who you are. She looked at me for a long time. Why are you telling me that? She asked. Because in 6 years of this work, I said, I have learned to separate what a person did from what they are. The record is the record. The hearing will determine what happens next. You are a person who did something wrong at 15 that affected 14 years of your life and other people's lives. Both of those things are true. She was quiet for a long time. I need to tell Cael myself, she said. I looked at her. The notification, I started. I need to tell him before the official notification, she said. Give me 3 days. 3 days to tell him myself, in my own words, before it becomes official. I looked at her. I thought about what I knew of the process. The 5 days for documentation completion. 3 days was within that window. 3 days, I said. The documentation is complete in 5. If you tell him in the next 3 days, the official notification will reach him when he already knows. Yes, she said. And the conversation you have with him, that is yours, I said. I am not present for it. I am not reporting on it. What you say to your husband in 3 days is between you and him. She looked at me. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, I said. Do what you need to do. The 3 days that followed were the most difficult of my 6 years in this work. Not because I was uncertain about the investigation. The investigation was solid. The documentation was complete. The evidence was clear. Because I was present in a house where a woman was preparing to dismantle everything she had built, and I could feel the weight of that in the air of every room. I went to the archive every day. I completed the documentation. I filed the preliminary technical reports with the Continental Governance, as required. I ate my meals quietly, and I did my work, and I was unremarkable. On the second day, Cael came to the archive. He came at 11 in the morning, which was outside his normal schedule. He looked at me with the specific expression of a man who was in the process of processing something enormous. He sat down across from me. My wife told me, he said. I know, I said. Last night, he said. She told me everything. I know, I said again. He was quiet for a moment. You knew she wasn't who she said she was, he said. Before you came. The investigation was initiated 2 months before I arrived, I said. The Grenfell records analysis had already been completed. And you came here too. To complete the documentation and initiate the formal notification process, I said. He looked at me. You knew, he said. Every time I came to the archive for administrative sign-off. You knew. Yes, I said. And you didn't tell me. Protocol requires the formal notification process, I said. A pack integrity investigation does not share findings informally with any party prior to formal notification, even when the party is the alpha. Especially then, I said. The alpha is the governance. The investigation's independence from the governance is what makes it valid. He was quiet. She thinks you came here to take her husband, he said. That was her first reading. Yes, I said. I know. The truth is considerably more complex, he said. Yes, I said. He looked at his hands. I need to ask you something, he said. Ask. What happens to my children? I looked at him. Your children are your children, I said. Nothing in the investigation or the hearing changes who their biological parents are. Nothing changes your relationship with them or their standing in this pack. But their mother is facing a governance hearing, I said. The outcome of that hearing will determine what happens to her status. But your children's status as your children is separate from your wife's status as Luna. I paused. That is not something I say to make you feel better. That is what the governance provisions actually say. He looked at the table. She was 15, he said. Yes, I said. She was 15 years old and she changed a record because she could see what being the gardener's daughter in a pack meant for the rest of her life. Yes, I said. And everything since then has been built on that, he said. Yes. He was quiet for a long time. I waited. Is she a good person? He asked. The question surprised me. It was not a question I was used to being asked in investigations. I thought about it. I don't assess people, I said. I assess records. I know, he said. I'm asking anyway. I looked at him. She came to me in the kitchen 3 weeks ago, I said. She thought I was a threat to her marriage. She was protecting it. In the wrong direction, because she was reading the wrong threat. But she was protecting it. He was quiet. She told me last night, he said. Not because the formal notification was coming. She had 3 days. She could have used those 3 days to find a counsel, to prepare a defense, to make the formal notification the first thing I heard. He paused. She told me first. She sat me down and she told me everything, including the parts that made her look the worst. I looked at him. Yes, I said. That's not nothing, he said. No, I said. It's not. The formal notification happened on the 5th day. Not a surprise. The notification was simultaneous, delivered to Brya and Cael and the current Grenfell Pack governance at the same moment through the Continental Governance's formal channels. By the time it arrived, the conversation in the house had already happened. The hearing was scheduled for 30 days out. I stayed in Veldran for the first week of that 30 days, completing my obligations and documenting the final elements of the investigation record. In that week, 3 things happened that were not part of the investigation. The first, Brya came to the archive. Not confrontationally. Quietly. She came in the morning, when the archive was opening, and she stood at the work table where I had been working for 3 weeks, and she said, I would like to see the original record. The Grenfell birth record? I said. Yes, she said. The original. What it said before I changed it. I understood what she was asking. She was asking to see the truth of herself. The documented truth. The record of what she had been before she decided to be something else. I had a copy of the technical analysis in my files. The underlying original was visible in the chemical analysis imaging. I showed her. She looked at the image of the original record for a long time. The names in the original parentage field. Her real parents. Wolves whose names she clearly recognized and who were clearly not the Grenfell Alpha's family. She looked at it for a long time. Then, my mother died when I was 7, she said. My father worked in the garden until he died when I was 19. I had already made the change by then. Yes, I said. He never knew, she said, that I had done it. He never knew that I had been moving through the world as someone other than who he raised. No, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I would like a copy of the original, she said. For the hearing? For myself, she said. I looked at her. Yes, I said. I made the copy. She took it. She left. The second thing, I found a secondary record, not related to Brya's case directly. In the archive, during my final documentation sweep, I found a secondary record in the historical holdings that cross-referenced the Wren Pack's governance history. A record from 20 years ago, before Brya's alteration. The record documented a formal governance dispute within Wren Pack about the Alpha bloodline. A dispute initiated by the gardening staff's family on the grounds that a child born within the household had been denied recognition by the Alpha's governance. The record was incomplete. The dispute had been closed, officially, without resolution. But the initiation of the dispute was documented. I read the record 3 times. I thought, the gardening staff's family had tried to claim recognition for a child. I thought, the Wren Alpha had denied the claim. I thought, if the denial was unjust, if the child was in fact recognized by the Alpha's bloodline and the denial was a governance suppression rather than a factual determination. I took the record to my files. I forwarded it to the Continental Governance. This was not in my investigation remit. This was the part of my work that was not about the falsification I had been sent to find. This was the part about what the falsification might have been, from a 15-year-old's perspective, trying to claim something that had been denied. The Continental Governance would determine what the record meant. I had done what I could do. The third thing, Cael came to me alone in the archive on the last day. He sat across from me. He looked like a man who had been through something enormous and had arrived somewhere on the other side. I've spoken to the Wren current leadership, he said. I know, I said. The notification went to them simultaneously. The current leadership, he said carefully, has conducted their own internal review. In light of the investigation findings and the secondary record you forwarded. He paused. Their assessment is that the original dispute closure 20 years ago was unjust. That there was evidence of bloodline recognition that was suppressed by the then Alpha. I was very still. That is a significant determination, I said. Yes, he said. It is. And the governance implications of that determination are going to take time to work through. But what it means in the context of the hearing, he stopped. What does it mean? I asked. It means, he said slowly, that the picture of what Brya did is different from the picture that existed when the investigation began. She did not falsify a claim she had no right to. She documented a claim that had been suppressed. A pause. Improperly, without the documentation required, in a way that is still a governance offense. But the underlying claim may not have been fraudulent. I looked at him. She didn't know that when she did it. I said. No, he said. She was 15. She had a parent she had watched be denied. She had access to the record. She did what she could do with what she had. The hearing will determine what this means legally, I said. Yes, he said. He was quiet. The bond between a pack and its records, he said slowly. You've been doing this for 6 years. Is there ever a case where the record was falsified but the falsification documented something that was also true? I looked at him. Twice, I said. In 6 years. Both times, the person who falsified the record had a reason that the formal process had failed to accommodate. What happened to them? The first was prosecuted, I said. The falsification was real regardless of the reason. The consequences were reduced on account of the circumstances. She served a governance sanction rather than a criminal one. And the second? The second was me, I said. He was very still. My own case file, I said. From before I was an investigator. My mother's death record. It listed her as having died without dependents. I paused. I was her dependent. I was 13. Without the correction, her estate would have gone to a distant governance fund rather than to her surviving family. You falsified a record, he said. I corrected an error, I said, in a way that required adding information that was not verified through the proper process. Technically, a falsification. Substantively, an accurate record. He looked at me. Does the Continental Governance know? He asked. Yes, I said. I disclosed it before I took this position. Full disclosure is required. They determined that the circumstances were sufficient to allow the position regardless. He was quiet. You told me that, he said. Why? Because you asked me a question that required honesty, I said. And because in 6 years of this work, I have learned that the full picture matters. Not just the legal picture. The full human picture of why someone did what they did. He looked at me. The full human picture of why my wife did what she did, he said, is complicated, I said, and is going to take time. And the hearing will address the legal dimension. But yes. He was quiet. Will you testify? He asked. I am the investigator of record, I said. My testimony is part of the formal process. Will you testify to the full picture? He asked. Not just the falsification. The full picture. I looked at him. Yes, I said. It is my obligation to report all relevant findings. The secondary record. The suppressed dispute. The circumstances. All of it. Thank you, he said. He stood up. He left. I sat in the archive. I thought about Asta Vane. 42 years old. For years in detention. Not guilty. I thought about what had separated Asta's case from Brya's. Asta had done nothing wrong. Brya had done something that was wrong in method and complicated in motivation and connected to a prior injustice that had created the conditions for the wrong. Both were in the records. Both would be addressed. Both deserved the full picture. That was what the work was for. The hearing was in 30 days. I was not present for the outcome. Investigators of record were required to testify and then were required to leave the formal hearing. The determination was made after testimony by the hearing board, without the investigator present. I testified. I gave the full picture. The falsification. The technical evidence. The secondary record. The suppressed dispute. The circumstances. The 15-year-old who had looked at the ceiling of her life and found a door and used it. The board asked their questions. I answered. I left. I received the formal outcome notification 6 weeks later. Not a personal notification. The case file notification that went to all investigators on closed cases, recording the outcome for the governance record. Brya Ashcroft had received a governance sanction, not a criminal one. A formal record of the offense. A requirement to submit to a reevaluation of her Luna standing. A conditional reinstatement pending a period of supervised governance service. The treaty between Veldran and Grenfell had been suspended pending renegotiation. The renegotiation was to be conducted on the basis of the Grenfell leadership's determination that the original bloodline recognition dispute had been unjustly suppressed. The outcome of the renegotiation was not in the notification. It would be conducted between the packs, without my involvement, the way it should be. The children were noted as unaffected by the governance determination. The marriage was noted as a matter for the relevant parties to address privately, outside governance jurisdiction. I filed the notification in the case record. I closed the file. I moved on to the next case. 6 months later, I received a letter. Not through governance channels. Through the personal address I maintained for correspondence that the governance division did not need to handle. The letter was from Brya Ashcroft. Not a long letter. 2 pages. But a letter that had been written carefully, with the attention of someone who had been choosing their words for a long time. She told me that the renegotiation between Veldran and Grenfell had concluded. That the new treaty was stronger than the original, built on a genuine accounting of the Pack's mutual interests rather than on a bloodline claim. That the Grenfell current leadership had formally recognized the historical injustice of the original dispute suppression, and that the recognition had produced something that could not have been produced by the original treaty. An actual relationship. Not an arrangement built on a claim. A relationship. She told me that the governance sanction was ongoing and that she was in the supervised service period and that she found the work, the actual governance work, the documentation, the record keeping, the real substance of what she had been performing for 5 years without the infrastructure. She found it more interesting than she had expected. She told me that Cael had stayed. Not easily. Not without the specific, difficult work of two people renegotiating a marriage in full view of everything that had been hidden. But he had stayed. She told me that her daughter, who was 8, had asked her one night what the governance specialist had been doing in the archive for 6 weeks. She had told her daughter, fixing the record. Her daughter had asked, what was wrong with it? She had told her daughter, something was missing. Her daughter had nodded with the specific, uncritical acceptance of an 8-year-old and had asked when she could have more porridge. Brya ended the letter. I am not thanking you for doing your job. I know you did not do it for me, and I know the outcome was not your decision. But I want you to know that the full picture you testified to, all of it, including the secondary record, including what a 15-year-old was looking at when she made the choice she made. I want you to know that being seen fully, even in something I am not proud of, was not what I expected from this process. I expected to be reduced to what I did. I was not. I do not know if that is your particular approach or the process's design, but it mattered. It mattered to me. So I am telling you. I read the letter twice. I filed it. Not in the case file. In my personal archive. The accumulation of reasons why the work was worth doing. There is something I have come to understand in 6 years of this work. Records were not neutral. Every archive told a story. Every catalog of births and deaths and land transfers and governance decisions was a version of reality, and the version depended on who was doing the recording and what they decided to include and what they decided to leave out. The records that were never falsified were still, in subtle ways, selective. They preserved the version of events that the governance found useful to preserve. They recorded the wolves who mattered to the governance and left gaps where the wolves who did not matter had moved through the world without documentation. Falsification was a crime. It was a crime because it introduced deliberate untruth into the record. But the deliberate untruth was often, not always, but often, introduced because the original record was itself insufficient. Because the governance had failed to record something accurately, and the person who was harmed by that failure had used the tools available to them to correct it by other means. The work was not simple. It never had been. That was why it required 6 years. That was why it required full-picture testimony. That was why Asta Vane, who had spent 4 years in detention for something she had not done, was the reason I got up every morning and found the things that needed to be found. Because the records mattered. Because the truth mattered. Because a 15-year-old who could see the ceiling of her life deserved to have someone, eventually, look at the full picture. And because the full picture was always more complicated than the simple story anyone had decided to tell. If you stayed with this story, from the kitchen at 7 in the morning, through the archive, through the letter written 6 months later, you already know it wasn't about what you thought it was. It wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about a woman who wanted someone's husband. It was about the records we keep. The lies we tell to survive in a world that built its ceilings too low. The investigators who have seen enough to understand that wrong is complicated and truth is not simple, and the full picture is always bigger than the easy version. It was about Brya, who falsified a record at 15 because she could see exactly what not falsifying it would cost her. And about Wren, who spent 6 years finding those records and never stopped asking why. And about the people who live their lives in between. This channel exists every week for the ones who have been reduced to what they did without anyone asking why. For the ones doing the work at 3 in the morning when no one is watching, because the work is the thing that matters. For the ones who received a letter 6 months later that said being seen fully mattered. You deserve the full picture. Subscribe. Hit that bell. Drop your location in the comments because I need to know where in the world someone needed to hear that the truth is not always the simple version, and the simple version is not always the true one. The next story starts with a record that doesn't add up. By the end, you will understand why. And you will not be able to look away. See you there.